Good morning. Well, hang on. Aaron, you said you can hear me scrolling. Made in time to hear the mouse clicks. Okay, so hopefully that means the live stream is running. I'm doing this through StreamYard at the moment, which I don't normally do. So I wasn't even sure if YouTube would automatically start the stream. So first, good morning to everybody. Oh, Christabel, Pranil, and Greg is here, Michael, some call it fun, Bob Powers, James, Aaron, Sion's here, Dodgy's here, Jordan, Dana, and sorry if I missed anybody, Gerald. I'm just scrolling down the list. So you can, just to make sure, you can hear me. Mike, good to see you all here. All right, now I have a very special live stream today because we have a guest coming on, which is why I'm using StreamYard. Oh, but before I get into that, I just need to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and to Aboriginal elders and peoples from other communities who may be taking part in this live stream today. Now, let's just get straight into it because my guest today has done many very interesting things, and I want to find out about some of the projects that he's been doing. So everybody, welcome to the stream. Iggy, hang on, I'm going to do a bit of rearranging here. Good morning.
Morning.
Yes, crossing the streams. Hey, so it's really cool to have you on the stream. And just before the stream, we were just talking about last time. So we would have seen each other in Perth at LCA in 2014, I think was the year that we worked out. Yeah.
When we were talking about your space projects and the implications of trying to send them overseas and stuff.
Oh, right. Yes, that's right. With the export control stuff. Yeah. Okay. Hang on. Sion said, "Oh, Iggy, clean your workbench." No, but that workbench is loaded up with awesome stuff. I want to ask some questions about it.
And for Sion's benefit, if he looks in the background over there, is a conductive filament print of his little assembly platform.
Ooh, nice. So you specifically used conductive filament for that one?
Yeah, because I'm an ESD troll, so I had to take my own medicine.
Yeah. Out of curiosity, what is the ESD filament like to print with? I see we're chasing squirrels already.
Horrible.
Yeah.
It's the layer adhesion is very variable. So if I push this too hard, it will actually split. Yeah, and that's even the expensive stuff, which I think, I can't remember the name of it, the stuff that's sold by Core and a couple of other people. It still doesn't have the layer adhesion of some of the others, and you can just see there are a couple of marks on this one where I think I've actually run a little bit of glue into it. So for a device just sitting there like that, it's going to be fine, but with fine walls, you'll find that they'll break apart. But otherwise, it should serve the purpose. And I've got a laser cutter, so I'll cut an acrylic top for it. But all the goodies will still be sort of doing the dissipation through the conductive mat and the material. So it should be awesome. So thanks, Sion. Great design.
Cool. Something I need to ask about that is I've printed one as well. It's sitting on my bench back there somewhere. And possibly because the bearings that I got weren't quite right, or tolerances or something, the top plate tends to flop around a little bit. It's not very rigid. So do you have much movement in yours? Yeah, it does have a little bit. So I've been meaning to ask what his is like as well. So
I think that the bearings that I used in that's the large bearing, isn't it? It might actually be a millimeter taller than the one that Sion specified, but I went down to the local bearing place and just grabbed whatever they had. So. Okay.
Cool. Dodgy just said, can you blend filament to give it a better bond? I don't know. That's unless you have very fancy equipment and the ability to make your own filament, that's probably a question for the filament manufacturers.
We should have Joseph Crusoe on here as well or something.
Yeah. So there are a bunch of projects that you've worked on that I would like to ask about, and we're probably only going to touch on a few of them. So let's start with a couple of the recent ones. Just recently on Twitter, you posted photos of a PCB that you etched, and it was so it was a breakout board that you did. Now I'm just going to figure out how to share this so that other people can see it. If I do, let me see. Because I'm doing this through StreamYard, I can't just do my normal desktop sharing thing. Or maybe I can. If I do this and then I hit desktop, yeah, I think that works. Oh, look, you've got the, that's my other camera, which shouldn't actually be visible. So hang on, I'm going to make that camera invisible. Get rid of that. Okay, that's better. So for anybody that's interested in Iggy's projects and things, check out the Good Not Evil, GUDNOTEVL account on Twitter. So
do you know, here's a squirrel for. Do you want to know why I picked that?
Yes.
I may have spent a considerable number of years in New South Wales Cops, and being the man with a tech background and who could operate Microsoft Paint, I would be called upon to do all the evil photos of people for farewells. And one day the detective sergeant said, "Iggy, if only we could use your powers for good and not evil." So
yeah.
And so that's where the nickname stuck from for that.
Cool. Now I'm still trying to figure this out because I've got if I do hang on. All right, if I do this, I can't actually see StreamYard right now. Is that showing is that showing the picture so that you can see it?
Yep.
Yep. Okay, great. Yeah, so this is a breakout board that you just did just recently, and it's one that you etched at home. So you've done inkjet printing onto transparency film and then etched it. That looks a lot like a Vroom 32 or something. What is the module that's sitting in the middle here?
So the module is microchips. Is it WRL or WLR 089U0, which is a SAM R34. So it's basically a SAM L21, but it's also got a LoRa radio on board. Okay. And a friend and I are doing some fiddling, and of course, because they come in a module with 1mm pin spacing, I thought it was going to be handy just to have something so we could plug in USB, have a 3.3 volt regulator on there, and break the leads out a little more easily.
I see. Yep.
So I actually got lazy and whipped it up in Easy EDA because, excuse me, I'd already drawn a footprint in there in case I wanted to go and do the JLC PCB thing. Then I went and printed the. I used. Actually, here's one of your squirrels. I found a really neat set of tools on the web that allowed me to take Gerbers, combine them together, and then so you could panelize even different designs. But this is obviously just the one design. So that's inkjet printed onto some clear acetate that's designed for inkjet or laser printers on the other side. That's commonly used for screen making for screen printing on t-shirts. And that's only a single layer. I just printed it as photo quality with a single layer. I then I use Kingston PCB material, which is the UV sensitized positive PCB material. You print this back to front so the ink ends up down onto the copper, so you don't get white bleed around the edges of it. And then I use one of those nail salon little UV exposure boxes, the ones that are sort of about that big. You can buy them for a couple of bucks on eBay or second-hand shops. And 51-second exposure was all it needed. Then you develop it in their developer solution, which is, I think, an alkaline something or other. And you end up with a green sort of finish still on the boards. Oh, come on.
Yep.
And this has obviously been etched. Then I use a vertical bubble tank, the sort you can buy from some of the PCB places. It looks like a fish tank for anorexic
A very
goldfish.
skinny fish tank, yes.
Tip hot water into it out of the tap, just the normal 70 degrees C or whatever comes out, some ammonium persulfate, and just bubble etch it. And it does a really, really nice clean job, as you can see.
Yeah.
The Kingston material I got a few years ago when I did a project for a mate of mine, where we needed to turn something around really quickly, and he said, "Look, what can we do?" So I just got him to order a stack of it. He gave me all the rest of the Kingston material it had with it, because I did a surface mount RF filter for him, and so I still have that sitting there. I can't even remember what it's worth these days. It probably works out just as expensive as doing a DHL and a $4 order from PCB place, but you can have it like in an hour. And sometimes I want that, instant gratification, so to speak.
Yeah, you can't really beat that latency of that that very quick turnaround time. Yeah, it's a long time since I've made any PCBs myself. I've still got all the chemicals. There's one of the plastic tubs up over my bench is the PCB making kit, and it's got all the stuff in it that I need. But yeah,
it's been a couple of years since I'd done any, so I wasted a lot of board remembering what exposure time I used last time, because I was too stupid to not write it in a book somewhere.
Didn't have any notes. One thing I noticed about that, hang on, I'm going to bring back this this image, because I just noticed that, where are we? Here we go. So this is the fully assembled board with that module on it. Because this is etched, it's only a single-sided board, is my guess. You didn't show the other side. How are these pin headers attached? Are they
they're right-handle ones, and I cut them off.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
I was going to drill them, but that would mean going down to the garage and fighting for the Dremel. So I just left it as single-sided. The other side is actually a ground plane, and I've got a couple of tie points to the ground plane, just so we have somewhere for those nice return currents to go.
Is that what this wire is down in the bottom left corner?
Yeah,
it's wrapping around.
And there's one up at the other corner as well.
End. Yep, I see it.
And one at the side. Then the blue jumper is just to bring 3.3 volts across to 3 of the pins along the side. Hang on. Let me try this with the camera, shall I?
Okay, go for it.
So now Sion will see even more of the mess. I do that, and it's not awake yet because I closed it. The joys of live broadcasting.
Yeah.
Here we go. So, do you need me to move over? Is that, which way do you need me to move? That way?
I can see it there. It's just off the edge now a little bit.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah, it's got a few other things plugged into it as well.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just a ground plane underneath.
Yeah.
And I've been testing the SPI and the I2C, etc., because the library that I'm using is one that somebody's written for. Sorry, I'll switch back. Somebody had written for their own version of the WRL module, but then they'd started to do an implementation for the WRL, but hadn't added all the rest into the Arduino libraries. And I may have emailed someone about some hints on how to set up a library for a new board, but
you may have, but they may not have been very helpful. Yeah.
That's all right. I worked it out.
Oh, good.
So this board
that you're working on. Yeah. So this board that you're working on, what's the purpose behind it? Is there a project you've got in mind?
It's related to trackers, basically. And the full use I won't talk about because it's for a mate of mine who may use it commercially. But essentially it's to allow me to then do some power analysis on it, because I've got, because I think it's in the email to you, one of the OT ARC power analyzers, the IO2 power analyzers, which has nanoamp sort of resolution and power supply, does battery profiling. It's hiding over under the monitor there on the bench. But I wanted to get the platform up so that I could see what the current usage is during transmit, during the sleep cycles, during deep sleep. So we can profile all that properly, so he can go in with his eyes open and go, yeah, it's going to be worthwhile trying to do a tracker project based on it, because the current consumption is going to be appropriate.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and it's, again, another one of those toys where they're not cheap. I think they're about $900 or something, but every time you go to use it, you just go, oh, it's just so nice. So
yeah, there are some tools like that you can go years without needing, and then if you need it for a specific project, there is nothing that'll substitute. You just without it you can't get the information you need.
Yeah, and you can try using multimeters, you can use all those things. And I've previously used the Agilent N6705, which is their large source measurement unit. But one of those is $35,000, $40-something with the stuff in it. And 99% of the time when I've used it for no more functionality than the little Koitek device. So Vanya is watching. Hi. She's the CEO of Koitek.
So, okay, now that is an RF board, and you're talking about potentially being used for a tracker. Now, one of the other things that I saw just recently on Twitter was that you're doing some testing with some software that I've just got to see if I can find I've just lost my lost the thing I was looking at. Oh, here we go. Okay, yeah, you're doing some testing with some software that does RF analysis or simulation, and RF is one of those things that has always seemed like a bit of a mystery to me. So I actually did my amateur radio. Just got to bring this up on the screen. Let's see if I can share this desktop. Okay, so this is a screenshot of a simulation in this software that you've been using recently.
Sorry,
so can you explain? Hello. So can you explain what this software is all about? Like what it's what you're using that for?
Somebody actually tweeted that a company called Senos, who have this Senos platform thing. Let me just bring up their website so I don't get this wrong. So Senos-platform.com. And the company traditionally done simulation for induction heating. So you could work out exactly how objects were going to heat, etc. And apparently there are all sorts of benefits to induction heating things when you're going to stick them together or weld them or whatever. And they were running a beta test program for some antenna simulation software, which allows you to, in their case, use FreeCAD to draw the structure of the antenna. So do I have a PCB antenna? Well, I have a PCB antenna from not my design, but the recent B-Sides thing. So that terribly modified focus, that patch antenna up the top there, with a feed line down the bottom, is theoretically a 2.4 gig patch for the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth on the ESP32 that's on the B-Sides conference badge, and then a 50 ohm strip line going down to it. So to design that, you can either do the calculations, build a board, test it, find it's wrong, build another board, test it, find it's wrong, or you can go into something like the Senos software, and there are others like HFSS, which we've also used before, but I think a license for that is about 140K plus the annual subscription. So the whole field is usually really expensive unless you go right to the other extreme, and there's the NEC simulation software, which has been free and available for donkey's years, but you don't have the benefits of it all being integrated into a CAD package. So anyway, so you could draw this up in the CAD software along with the feed line going down, specify the type of PCB material, the thickness, the ER constants for the material, and then simulate it in the software, and then work on measuring in the software itself through the simulation of it. It'll give you what the impedance really is. You can then use that to calculate, matching networks, at least ideal matching networks, which are going to be different as soon as you put anything on the circuit board. And you can iterate through that in the software really quickly. So anyway, I jumped onto the beta test program, and apparently I was noisy enough with the feedback I was providing and with some of the things I was playing with, which included a flat patch for 1296 megs for amateur radio. That they liked the conversations that we had, and they've given me a lifetime license, along with a couple of other beta testers, which is awesome. So, because they do have the hobby license, I think, is €20 a month or something, which I would have been really tempted to spend. And I think the commercial one is about €600 a month, but that's still so cheap. Excuse me, so cheap compared to other commercial things. And so they've now advanced it to where you can take, I believe, Fusion 360 designs. So if you had a helical antenna, or one of those clover leaf things that they use for the drone racing, you can actually model that 3D structure, and you can import that into the software, and then you can simulate that, and you go, okay, well, this says that with this thickness of wire that I'm using, the radiation pattern's going to be rubbish, and you can alter all that in the CAD, simulate it, and then try and see what it's like. So that's awesome.
Wow.
Yeah, it makes it really nice. So you can combine a bunch of free to relatively cheap software tools, so that even as a keen amateur, no pun intended, you can do that sort of simulation, whereas it was just completely out of the reach of most businesses as well as most hobbyists before.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the hobbyist license versus the commercial license, $20 versus $600 per month. Are there restrictions related to that, or is it mainly around using it for commercial purposes?
It's basically support. So if I look at their website, so they've got a community plan for individuals and hobbyists, which is €20 a month per workstation. Oh, sorry, the professional is $99 a month. It's not as crazy as I thought.
Yeah.
And you get right. So the community plan, it's a single core that will run on the simulation, so it takes a bit longer.
Okay.
Whereas it'll do multi-core, and it has and you get full live support in the software, whereas otherwise it's jump on the Slack channel and sort of chat to the other users. Yep.
Cool. Sion just asked for a website link, so I am just pulling that up right now. This is the
platform.com.
Yep. What I'm going to do is drop a link in the chat, which is to the news post about it, the Everything RF news post, and that's got the screenshot and and some links to it. So, Sion, I thought you might be a person that would be interested in this. When I saw this, the first thing that came to my mind is checking the performance of PCB antennas for things like ESP32 boards. And it looks like this might be a very useful thing for that. And if it can pull if it can integrate with the design that is in Fusion 360, so if we could, if we generate the board in, so I'm thinking of a workflow for Sion and myself in particular. We both use Eagle, or Sion is now using KiCad as well. So from Eagle, you can sync into Fusion 360, which gives you the physical structure. And then from Fusion 360, you could bring it into the Xenos software and simulate the radiation pattern and everything for the antenna. That would be a really, really useful little thing to do.
Yeah. And the thing you've got to remember is that the patch antenna I did, which I think it's elsewhere in my tweet, in my Twitter stuff, but I came really, really close to, I think within about 20 something megahertz of what the software said. And I'd measured the antenna. I've got a Roden-Schwarz VNA. So I'd measured the antenna, so I knew what it was like. So that was why it was a really good comparison with what their software was doing to give me an idea of how close it was going to be. And even they were surprised at how close. So they did a bit of a blog post or something somewhere about it. But the moment that you have that antenna on something, or this antenna, and this one unfortunately was resonant on about 2.7 gig. I'm not quite sure what happened there. So I tried various things to see if I could get it to work at 2.4 gig, but the antenna was also physically disconnected from the ESP32s with some 0.1 microfarad capacitors. But the moment you have an antenna like that on the board, if you're then wearing it, if you put it into a case, whatever, the characteristics are going to change.
Everything
completely.
changes. Yeah.
So there's no point beating yourself to death trying to get something exactly right, because it might look awesome on your bench and you'll lift it up a centimeter and it's different, and the customer will put it into a die-cast box or something.
And then it's all over.
So it's like, and same with matching networks. If you're doing a reasonable job, at least having a go at it, then good, because it's going to be different for every customer, unless they sit there and they go to the trouble. Sion knows this very well from having that learning curve, and I feel the same pain, because unless you're doing it all the time, I go off and I've got a mate who's a really good RF engineer, and thankfully he's very patient, so he'll explain things yet again. But so just best effort, and that's already way better than a lot of other very, very big, possibly American manufacturers do.
Cool. Now, that thing that you've been holding up and that you've mentioned a couple of times, that's the B-Sides Canberra conference badge. And I've shown the LCA conference badge on my channel a few times, but you did a conference badge a few years ago for B-Sides.
I did. So B-Sides in Canberra started in 2016, and it's run by Kylie and Silvio, who also have InfoSect, who do InfoSec training and stuff here in town. And Kylie knew me, Silvio didn't at the time, and she went, hey, do you want to do something on the design for a badge for the conference? And we were expecting about 300 attendees, which seemed like all very cool. So we had a really limited budget, because it was just this little community sort of conference here. So we wanted to try and get as much functionality in as we could, and we wanted to represent Canberra. So we ended up doing that, which has the Parliament House sort of on the top of it. It was obviously sponsored by some company that likes circles and T's. We used an ESP8266 module, and just the TFT, and as the basic badge that allowed people to control it with the buttons. Silvio wrote some old school type scroller demos, like you'd see on the old Commodore 64s or something.
Demo scene sort of stuff.
But I wanted to be super expandable, so I also added room for a 23017, the SPI based IO expander. I think you use the I2C ones possibly. The MCP 230, and then also the MCP 3208, the 8-channel ADC, and people had the option of adding the other goodies. At the conference, we had a hardware hacking village, but we assembled, like as the overall team, 300 of these by hand before the conference. Which was interesting. And of course, I did a trial board first, and discovered that the modules that I had were actually one row of pins wider than the boards. So I had some modules that were one size and some that another. So all those sort of issues that you find. And I did that in KiCad. That was my first KiCad experience, because I'd done it in Eagle. And then they went, oh, it's kind of an open source thing, with conferences. And I'm going, sure, we can redo that. But so we redid that, and that worked out really well. And they had a badge each year. The following year, similar themed, using the ESP8266. But then this year, B-Sides had over 3,000 conference attendees. And there's a local company called Pen10, who do some awesome stuff in some custom electronics and security electronics and other goodies. People can find them on the web. but they agreed to sponsor it. It was initially for last year, but because of COVID and what have you, the badge didn't get released until this year. But to have this thing made, there's a 3-color e-ink display. There's an optional accelerometer on it. It's got audio. It's got a SAMD21 as well as an ESP32 on it. Like, it's a phenomenal thing. And to hand that out for, what was the conference, $100 a head to every one of the 3,000 something conference attendees, it's like magnificent. So, and I think B-Sides is now the largest security conference in Australia.
Yeah, well, 3,000 people. That's a lot. For that badge, could you please just hold that up again and show the other side? Because on the black side, is that overprinted, or has that all been done just in the normal PCB fab process? So I can see some red and some white on there with the black.
Yeah, I don't know whether, I think it was all done in one hit. At least it looks like it, because there's white over the top of the red, so it's as if whoever manufactured the board for them was able to do that sort of at the same time. The boards themselves were manufactured by G&E, the CB radio people.
Okay.
Because they're a partner of Pen 10. Yeah, so I'm not sure exactly of the process.
Yeah, I wondered if maybe it had been done with some UV cured overprinting on top of the on top of the regular PCB.
Yep. The overlay on the other side is certainly white. So, and it's a bit of a matte finish to the red that's on there. So, yeah, I'm not sure how they did that. That's an interesting
it's a very cool looking board.
And it comes in a really nice. So that wasn't like the amount of effort that they went to on it. Just allow me to reach down here into the drawer. So when you get it, it actually looks like that.
Ooh.
So there's a full-on plastic structure around the sides. There's a front panel.
Wow.
It's a ridiculously good bit of overall product engineering, and a lot of thought and work has gone into it.
That's amazing. So it's a sandwich sort of structure with multiple boards. Sion pointed out that, please keep holding that up because that looks so good. Sion said there's no reason a board house can't do multi-passes of silk in different colors. They just don't offer it. Yeah, that's true. You can get custom color silk screen and things. If you're willing to pay for it, the board house will do almost anything. That's really nice.
The plastic extrusions also go down to the RGB LEDs which are around it. And then on the other side, the SAMD21 touch interface is connected to the. It's got me confused because they're all back front. So
everything's left to right,
that are underneath where those LEDs are. So there's a ton of stuff that this thing does. So
that is it's quite an assembly project, but it's also quite an engineering project. Designing the multiple boards to sandwich together with the bit in the middle.
And they had to do it all with the the world component sort of shortage in mind, as well as I think the work was actually done as a volunteer project by the guys there. So you can't take anything away from it. Separate to anything I've found just through my curiosity with the RF end of it, you can't take anything away from it. It's a fantastic device.
Yeah, that's very impressive. So there's a particular topic that I think people would be interested in hearing about, talking about B-Sides Canberra. And you can share as much or as little of this as you feel comfortable doing. You did a talk at B-Sides Canberra this year about a bit of a project you undertook, which I think was largely like you decided to take it on yourself and obsess over something because it really got under your skin and you wanted to solve the problem. Do you want to explain a little bit about what that is? I don't want to say anything that I shouldn't.
Well, apparently there's quite a good video on the B-Sides YouTube channel.
Yes, there is. Yeah,
which last time I looked had I had 3 less views than Mike Burgess, the Director General of Security. So
okay, I'm sure we can
I might
fix
have to
that
buy him a
problem.
coffee. He's still winning.
I'll watch it a few more times.
That's right. So back in 2019, I think it was, I got a phone call from some friends in a national law enforcement agency who knew that I did this sort of stuff and played and whatever
Tech
else.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And they said that they'd been, and they knew that I was an ex-cop, so it keeps you same sort of stead. And they said, hey, we've got this device. It's involved in cold case homicide that's happened in South Australia. And we've had a look at it. We've tried to recover what we can. Can't do anything with it. We're about to tell them that, we can't do anything. Do you want to have a look for us? I went, sure. Challenge accepted.
Yep.
And the device is an old Kodak camera, which, you'll have to look at the stream. I don't have the device or the bits lying around. But it's one of the old Kodaks that still has internal flash in it. So you can either put an SD card into it, or else it's got 16 megs of internal flash. So I started looking up data, etc., on the device. And what had happened is that they managed to do, so they'd done all the right things. They did a chip off, removed the NAND flash from the board, put it into a reader, run it through all the forensics tools, nothing out of it, like no images recoverable. And the device, as far as we understood, was a key piece of evidence in the case, which linked a number of things together. So the case is still in the courts at the moment, and I got told just the other day, because I sent the link to the video to the investigator, and it was funny because his comment was, I didn't understand a word of it, but awesome work.
Yeah. So the camera that you're talking about is the theory that there were photos on the camera that were potentially evidence and had been deleted.
Yes.
Is that the the general scenario?
Yeah. Yep.
So it was a matter of how do you get back the deleted images?
Yeah, that's right. And no doubt, because you could have a memory card in this thing, the person that was in possession of the camera didn't realize that there was internal memory in the camera that may still reveal, what used to be there. So they, because I wanted to stay completely removed from the case, they went to caches and found 2 more cameras. So they sent me one of those, dropped it off actually while I was doing a SANS forensics course for work. And I don't normally do forensics. It was just, I managed to get on a lot of courses. It's one way they can compensate you when they can't pay you real money. Yeah. And so they dropped this thing off to me, and I thought, I had a little bit of a fiddle, and I tried USB to see if it mounted as a disk drive and other things. Couldn't get anything out of it. So I did the same thing. So I removed the NAND flash from the board. I then built a reader using a TNC4 and put the NAND flash onto another SMD breakout board, and used the TNC4 to read the stuff off after going through all the data sheets for the NAND flash to get the command structure and stuff, because I hadn't worked with them before. And then started going through it, even just using a hex editor and looking, and then using some image recovery tools. So using Linux and PhotoRec, which is just an awesome photo recovery tool. And it found all these headers to images, but couldn't recover any images. So I kept looking at it and going back to the data sheets. And I dragged this out over a couple of months, and they're finally sort of going, oh, look, you're still sort of interested, because we kind of need to decide. And I then had a bit of a sprint session and jumped into it, and I discovered that the NAND flash stores data in 256-byte pages, and so there were 256 bytes, 256 bytes, and then a 16-byte page of data. And obviously, being an older device, it's about 2007 device, I think, from memory. Processors were a little bit slower, cheap consumer type camera, and I had no other info on this. So at the same time, I'd reached out to Kodak Australia and gone, g'day, I'm nobody. I'm doing this thing as a favor for some cops. Have you got any info? And they went, oh, look, we don't do anything with cameras anymore, but like we'll send an email to the States, and the summary is that basically they sent it to the States. Somebody in the States was interested enough in the fact that this was for a cold case, multiple homicide, that they contacted a design engineer who used to work on the project, and they actually sent me the design specifications for the project, which really just confirmed a lot of things you can find open source, but it was like resolutions, and told me I could find up to like 41 images on there and stuff, and that it's a fat file system, even on the internal flash. So I did that, kept looking at it, and I finally thought, well, the way the flash is structured, maybe they're trying to make it as fast as possible. And if there was a command that allowed you to read A, B, A, B, A, B from those pages of flash, but C required a separate command. So if they'd left that out, obviously it makes the device a lot faster. So I took out 16 bytes every 512 bytes and wrote that back to a file, then used the recovery tools and recovered all these pictures from the test camera that I had. It's like,
whoa.
yeah, I could hear the angels singing and whatever.
Yeah.
So I documented that stuff, sent it off to them, and contacted the investigating officers down in South Australia, and they were over the moon because they applied that to their same device and managed to recover, I'll call it a considerable amount because it's still before the courts, of information which they were extremely happy to see, and which apparently is making a very large difference to the overall situation. So we'll find out next year the final outcome, but presumption of innocence, all those good things.
Yes.
It looks like
you're obviously being very careful about how you word things as you're discussing this.
And the gentleman concerned is still in custody, and will be until then as well. But there's a certain degree of confidence based on what I was able to help them with. And it was awesome, just loved it. But yeah, it was one of those things where it just gets under your skin and you're going, well, I've got to use all this for something. I don't usually use it to make pocket money for any other projects. So I just kept hammering away at it for what's hopefully turned out to be a good result. So and they gave me a nice certificate or award. So
yep, that's good. And you get that feeling of satisfaction of having cracked a really difficult problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what I really like.
Sorry, I was just going to say there was a note in the comments. Someone said, doesn't chain of custody come into play? And having watched your B-Sides Canberra talk, I know the answer to this, which is that you did not do this work on the actual camera that was in evidence. Right. You did this on a duplicate camera to prove the technology, not to prove the technique.
So that's why they literally went to Cashies and bought an identical camera, sent me that camera. I had no access to the real evidence, no access to that camera. Therefore, I don't need to go to court. All I did was develop a technique that could be applied to the same cameras. And being an ex-copper, like that stuff was right up at the forefront of my mind.
Yes.
How do you stay distance from this and still do it? And we worked out that was the ideal way of doing it, because that can be applied by anybody to any of those devices. So.
Yeah. So does that mean that South Australia Police had someone authorised to work on the actual camera? So you develop the technique, you then document that and send it to whoever they're working with, and they do it themselves in a controlled environment.
Yes. So that it was done by another agency, and they basically, because it's a small community overall with policing in Australia. There are a couple of places that have really good capability, but they're all really, really busy. And you can't afford to spend months on a single case. You've got to get the things out the door. I think New South Wales might have one technician, one high-level tech that can do chip off for them.
One person.
Yeah, they weren't involved in this, but he is awesome, and he is often referenced by people who are teaching these forensics courses from the States because of his contribution back on forums and other things. So yeah, it's a small community, and so the stuff that they'd done had already stretched the limitations of the resources you could really throw at it. And while it was a simple answer, when you came down to it, it's like working to that process and going, what on earth were Kodak thinking at the time, and coming up with that, and then maybe it's, as I said in the thing, maybe it only takes 16 bytes to catch a killer.
Yeah. It's a classic example of that situation where you spend months gnawing on a problem, and you get to the end result, and the end result is simple. And when you present it, people think, okay, that seems simple. But to have arrived at that end result is not simple at all. I actually had a very simple conversation a week or so ago with a mechanical engineer that I'm working with on another project. And he said that this is a guy whose career has been building race cars. So he built cars for Craig Lowndes and he built a lot of supercars. And so what he would do is he would have a particular challenge where he had to design something or fabricate something that would solve a problem. And he would spend ages and ages on it, optimizing it, making it as light as possible, making it as strong as possible, and would present the finished thing. And it might be an incredibly simple structure. It's like a joint with a fillet in it. And people would look at it and say, is that all it is? Like, why did that take you so long?
Yep.
And they don't see all the iterations that went through it and all of the testing and trying a different structure. They only see the result. So the fact that you spent months on this, it's that shows the dedication that it takes to get to that end result.
Yeah, and it's almost embarrassing, how easy it is at the end of it. But that's why in the talk as well, I stretched the point of you can't hold it against the forensics guys that looked at it before me, because they
didn't have the months to spend. Yeah.
Also, do you like the T-shirt my daughter did for me as a
Merry Christmas? Oh yes, Spy v Spy.
So I actually before she did put the things onto T-shirts, and she did a couple for myself and a few friends, and I won't say why, but there's some significance. I actually contacted the artist who does the Spy versus Spy stuff, and he gave permission for it. And I think he thought I was a bit weird actually asking, because nobody else ever bothers. But
everybody just does it. Yeah, cool.
So all I can say is welcome to Canberra.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let's throw back to some retro computing sort of stuff back in the early days. So you've when you were first getting into computers, you were just a kid, and you did a bit of work with things like Z80 based systems like the TRS-80 Model 1 and machines around that sort of era.
Yep.
And also you worked at a telecom, like at a TV broadcast site. So could you talk a little bit about the early projects that you did related to that, either the Z80 based systems or the broadcast TV broadcast stuff?
So the Z80 stuff, I used to be a very naughty boy in WAG school, and I started school a year late because we came over from Germany. And so I was a year older than the rest of the classmates typically. And I was in the top class for most subjects except for English, where the English master and I, who didn't quite see eye to eye. And I used to go in WAG school, except I'd go and sit in the office of the Department of Education psychologist. And they used to be around as vocational guidance things. And he just bought a TRS-80 Model 1 and was trying to figure it out. And surprisingly, I had some programming experience because I'd learned to program at a winery that my dad used to do refrigeration work for, because they bought an IBM 5100, the desktop, super expensive little basic computer they used for their account stuff. And so I'd go and sit in Peter's office and write software for him, and I built one of the Electronics Australia electromyogram projects because he wanted to teach people to relax and stuff.
Oh, I remember that project. Yeah. So I built one of those for him that he then used on clients in there, and he basically said, look, I think you're wasting your time at school, but you should probably go into the broadcast operator's certificate, or one of the technical sort of qualifications through TAFE. Anyway, I ended up in telecom and sat in a telephone exchange for about 6 months before transferring to the broadcasting area. And that was from when I was about 17.
But you'd sit on a hill and you'd put Humphrey B. Bear to air in the morning, and you'd watch Noni Hazelhurst and Bettina watching, wearing their swim gear on play school. But there's not a lot else to do really, except for wipe the PCB oils off the transmitter capacitors and then make a cup of tea after you've wiped it on your clothes. And the local TV station, the engineer from there was interested. They also ran, so they ran MTN9, the television station out in regional New South Wales, and they ran 2PK, the radio station Parks, and 2MG, and they wanted to automate them. So we came up with a project to create an automation system using VHS cassettes for audio recording. And they had cues come down on the microwave link from the host network, the predecessor to WIN, which would tell them when to stop and start ads. So in 8086 assembler mostly, and then in C for the editing software and scheduling software, I created automation systems for the radio station and for the TV station. So it would switch the ads to air appropriately in the local ads for the TV station and allow them to run those radio stations. So that was a really cool thing, running on an old Epson XT or something or other machine. And that was, I think, one of the first automation systems that was around. So I did that as a sideline. And I also wrote stuff for microwave systems because I ran the user group out in the countryside. And I wrote the function key editor, which was distributed with all CPM microwaves around the world. And in return, they gave me my first own PC, which was the MyTac 8086, after staying at Owen and Linda Hills. And just those days of computing was just awesome, because you were so, even in a user group, you were so involved in it. And you could go up and visit the people and deal with them directly and talk to the engineers like Gerard Hill and all those others. So Gerard did the modem and did a bunch of other machines. And Garner Annett, who used to write the graphics code for their BASIC interpreter. And I think he's still with Apple these days as an Apple senior. But yeah, being involved way back then, did a couple of S100 based industrial control systems with my dad for fermentation controls in wineries. So lots and lots of assembly language over the years, which again is really good, because you're right down in the nuts and bolts.
Yeah, well, these projects that you're talking about, so both the winery automation and the broadcast automation, with all of these sorts of projects, there are both hardware and software components. So presumably, when in the broadcast system, for example, you had these VHS cassettes with the ads and things on them, you would have had to have some way of controlling the devices to tell them when to play, when to stop, when to rewind. How did you go about linking all of those things together?
We had some, basically just some digital I/O boards, and from memory it's now a long time ago. I'm now somewhere in my 50s, and I was about 19 when we did these things. From memory, we had some just ISA digital I/O boards for inputs and outputs, and would hit the pause button or the play button on the cassette. They might have been more upmarket ones that Ove was the engineer from the radio station, and it might have had a remote interface anyway, but that was it. We used to trigger them just using GPIOs, as you would on like you could do it with an Arduino these days. Trigger those, then look for the Q signal coming down from the satellite link, which was a tone decoder. Was it 567 or something, the tone decoder? And when it saw the tone, it knew that it needed to start the next sequence of switching, etc. So, really basic stuff, which every man his dog's doing with an Arduino of some sort these days.
Yeah. And did you use similar methods in the winery?
So in the winery we used Krememco. That was a big American manufacturer. Used the Krememco S100 cards. They had a Z80 single board computer, which I've still got one. And they had the D+7A, which was an A to D converter board with 7 channels on it. That, along with 20 milliamp current loops going off to I think the PT100 temperature probes, and then going out and switching relays for the solenoid valves on the coolant that would flow through the tanks. So that was very cutting edge. And the machine that we used to control it, I think, was a Krememco C10, which ran CDOS, which was their version of CPM. again,
Mhm.
a Z80 base box.
Yeah.
And I also wrote a full harvest, so grape intake system, which uploaded data to their Honeywell mainframes. So did lots of that sort of stuff, and while doing other jobs that were kind of unrelated to it. So.
Yeah. So you were doing all of those things. As you said, you were 19 when you were working on that broadcast system. So you were doing very deeply technical work back when you were very young. And then
Yeah,
I'm
back before I
curious to
forgot
know.
it all.
Before you forgot it, yeah. So I'm curious about this detour that you took into becoming a police officer. How did that come about?
Well,
That
I'd
sounds like
been
an unexpected twist.
Yeah, I got a redundancy because they were automating, ironically, they were automating all the transmitter sites.
Hmm.
So Telecom was getting rid of their broadcast stuff. So I got a redundancy from there, which was quite a lot of money for a 20-something-year-old. And I went and became a Unix system admin at a winery that, actually the same winery that had that IBM 5100, because they'd
Hmm.
known me since I was a little kid. Worked there for a little while. They were already going under. And then I went off to be the service manager for a local IBM and Apple dealership. And they had 3 stores around the place. So we do all the board level service, because that's all you're allowed to do with Apple gear at the time.
Yeah.
And you'd write some custom things. And there we also had some projects, for example, importing data from John Deere, and we would get the data on normal data tapes from their mainframe. So we had a reader player for that, which we connect to a PC. So I wrote all the software to make that go into, I think, the Breeze accounting system at the time. But worked for those people for a bunch of years, then went out on my own for a year and a bit and went, supposedly I'm really good at this technical stuff, but I'm not very good at listening to my wife, who'd already done a small business management course. And I probably need to get a real job again.
Yeah.
And let somebody else worry about the admin. So I went, I've always wondered what it's like to be in the cops. So I applied and strangely enough got in. Left the family at home out in the countryside and did 6 months at Goulburn Academy and 6 months in Sydney. And while I was in Sydney, still as a probationary constable, I got called up by the boss one day and he said, the commander of STIB, the Special Technical Investigation Branch, wants to see you. And I was pooping myself as a young probationer, thinking, what had
You
I
thought you were
done?
in big trouble.
Yeah. But it turned out that he'd been sent a letter by somebody in internal affairs who he'd helped out on a job on a beach, going, hey, there's this technical guy and you should probably talk to him. So he wanted me to join STIB up in Sydney, but there's no way that, as a constable, you could afford to move to Sydney from the relatively cheap country town. So did my time there, and then having already done computer work for the regional commander for the assistant commissioner out in Wagga, he made Griffith a training station, so I transferred back home again and did the rest of my service there, where we did weird things like work general duties, set up the New South Wales Police intranet, much to the annoyance of the corporate IT people. But that was sponsored by Pete Ryan, who was the Pommy Pete, we called him, the English fellow who was brought in to be Commissioner of New South Wales Police. And we actually ran a little box running Apache and Windows NT sitting in the corner of my office and hosting his office on it. And the corporates from the mainframe world used to grumble and moan, etc., about that and tell us that we weren't allowed to do it until Pete literally turned up at a big meeting in Sydney. I'd just give the constable what he wants. And then I decided to get back out of that after about 8 years, and that was enough, and went back to the IT world, and then sort of up here into the strange space that I work in these days.
Yeah. So when you say strange space that you work in, I don't know whether you want to talk about this or not, but so your work situation has just changed. You've just finished up at a certain position, and it's about to change.
Yeah. About to leave somewhere after almost 14 years and go to a different position involved in let's call it personal security and mumbling into sleeves. But with a very, very strong technical focus that I'll be leading. So that should be really good fun, because it'll allow me to use all of this a lot more than I perhaps have in the last few years. And they're very excited about it, and I'm very excited to be working in a slightly familiar environment again. But, with some people that some of us like, some of us don't like, but many people vote for. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Cool. Are you doing that from? You don't need to explain where you are or anything, but are you having to move or anything for that, or is it something you can do semi-remotely? What sort of work environment is it?
Some of it, I believe, I'll just be able to do here, because there's no point duplicating all of this to do other
You're
things.
already very well set up.
Yeah, so there'll be some, and like where I work at the moment, we're extremely well resourced, but I still only half jokingly say that I've got a better hammer at home, because everything is there. Nobody walks off with anything. I have all the bits and pieces I could want. I spend way too much time buying components that I probably don't need until that one day when I do need them, which makes it easy to prototype things and to fiddle with things. And because I have good RF test equipment and all the other goodies, it's just works out to be a good environment. So some of it I'll be able to do here. Some of it I'll be operational. So I'll be traveling wherever is required. And that's, I think, what makes it exciting. Kids grew up long ago. My son is very successful in information security, working for a very large corporate company, but also from home. So I'm hoping to do a little bit of that mixed with probably most of the time working with a small but really cool team of people that I will feel very safe around.
Good. I want to talk to you about more personal projects in a moment, but while we're on the subject of law enforcement, James asked whether you can talk a little bit about OPSEC with police systems. So that's a very, very broad question. But yeah, is there anything that you can talk about? Like, what's it? The impression I get is that the IT environment within the police force is probably quite similar to any large corporate, and it's got people with very varying levels of expertise and awareness of OPSEC issues. So there must be some challenges that you would face.
Well, I haven't been in the New South Wales in the job since 2004, so things were very different IT-wise back then, which is why when they first introduced IP networking, we were able to just look at the network. You could install anything on any PC that you felt like, especially I was an Intello sitting in an office, and so the situation, for example, we just used an old PC that we had lying around, which we installed Apache on and MySQL and all the other things, and then just stuck it on the IP network. And you can imagine the reaction from people who are used to working in the mainframe world, where they're like, you just can't do that. It's like, you're going to use up all the bandwidth. And so it was funny back then, they actually made me stand up at a conference of all the local area commanders, which is based on the New York model of having these crime review panels, where the commissioner and stuff will get all the seniors from the regional stations in and just hammer them about their statistics and whatever's happening. So they stood me up there and we're going, okay, well, you're going to it uses too much bandwidth and you're going to upset the network and stuff. And I had all the IP and network utilization stuff there just printed out, so I could tell them exactly what we were using, how much bandwidth we were using, the total impact on the network. Because they didn't know I was from a technical and IT background to start off with, they just thought
they thought they'd bamboozle you.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is not to be.
So I was lucky when I left there. I left the job with a reference from the deputy commissioner and also from the assistant commissioner and a few others, as this lowly sort of single stripe constable, which is you're just below the rank of a police dog at that stage.
Yeah.
So the situation back then, of course, was very, very different, and it's what you would think of horror stories in InfoSec these days, where people can just install whatever they want, do whatever they want on the network. You could run the early versions and predecessors of Wireshark, for example, and some people have told me you would have been able to read emails of supervisors sending dirty jokes to each other.
Yep.
Somebody else may have done that.
That does not surprise me at all.
Somebody else may have done that.
Somebody may have. Yeah, probably back in the days of UUCP and those sorts of things. So
yeah,
yeah.
And the original email system, I think, that New South Wales Cops had was designed as a messaging service for Volvo for spare parts. So
Really? Ah,
yeah.
okay.
So it was a thing called Memo from memory. Yeah, it was a horrible system, and
Yeah.
IPsec just was unheard of. And then they were all network hubs; they weren't switches, so you plug in anywhere and you had all the traffic. So,
Yes.
so these days, I believe that their posture is very, very good, and they have dedicated, security and cybersecurity teams. They're working at different classifications, so you're working at that basic level that all the general duties would see, as well as other levels that are more linked to being able to communicate with other national security agencies, and those systems tend to be air-gapped and stuff. So,
yeah, I can imagine it must be an enormous challenge managing those systems. There was quite a few years ago, back in the IVT days, one of the projects that we did was an integration between an access control system that's used at airports and the Australian Federal Police's background check system. And for the background checks, they had a system that published an API, or exposed an API. So what we would do is collect the data from Brisbane Airport, and everybody that was applying for either airside or groundside security clearance, or a weapons license, or a vehicle license, for example, to be able to drive a vehicle on the tarmac, had to go through this accreditation process. And so we wrote the software that took all of that data and then linked to the AFP's API, ran the background check, got the result, sent the approval or denial back to the airport, which then fed the data into the access control system so that they could then use their card swipe to open and close the doors that they were authorized to go through. And the idea, in retrospect, that whole thing kind of horrifies me. The idea that the AFP
it sounds like a movie, doesn't it? The perfect opportunity of getting into that sort of access control.
That's right. And so we were the software developer sitting in the middle, talking to the AFP's system. We were talking to Brisbane Airport system and passing the messages back between them. And we could have done anything. Oh, you want access to the runway? No problem. I will authorize that card for you.
That actually sounds just like one of the scenes from the Bourne films with the young lady who's the IT person in the CIA or something, and she's sitting there giving him access as he's getting his border check done. So
yes. Yeah. So a couple more things that we could cover. You said you collect vintage computers. So you've got an XD Sorcerer Mark II, which is that's a real classic. And a whole bunch of other things.
We actually bought that back in 1979 from Dick Smith Electronics. So it was crazy expensive. I think they were $1,495 or $1,795 with 48K RAM and still only tape drives. But Dad did a ton of simulation stuff on it, so it kind of paid for itself. But it's like buying a Macintosh these days.
Yes. Yeah. And the machines that you have, do you run them or do you collect them? Do you just have them like sitting on a shelf? What state are they in?
They're all working. So I've got, probably much to my wife's annoyance, I've got this study, which we modified. It's a 5-bedroom house. So the kids moved out long ago. So 2 of the rooms are still suitable for visitors and for the grandchildren. Excuse me. And then I've got this study set up, which I completely refurbed. Actually, I think we talked about this on one of your chats, using the caboodle kitchen cabinet stuff.
Oh, right,
so
yes.
So I've got the cabinets right across the top, because it's only a smallish room, but the kitchen cabinetry stuff goes like right around. The door is way around that side. So I've got my little reflow oven, some component storage up in the top. This will make you happy. Here's one of your squirrels. or rabbits, because I've got a rabbit.
Okay.
But I've got,
I see
think there
lots
are
of
about
labels.
100, about 100 of those little takeaway containers up there, all labeled with
Yeah.
whether it's tactile 6mm style switches, whether it's motion sensing modules, whether it's you name it, little switch mode blobs, etc. To try and keep those components organized. And after I don't know, 40 something years in the industry, that's the first time I'd bothered, was this year, really, in trying to tidy all that up. Then some more storage and the wire reel stuff, etc.
Yep.
But
I'm a big fan of kitchen cabinets.
Yeah, this is great. I'm really happy that we spent it was a couple of $1,000. I think it wasn't all that much, because the caboodle stuff is reasonably economical from Bunnings. But with the big drawers down the bottom and the other things and a little alcove for my feet, etc. behind me, it just works really well for me. And I'm not a person who ever works in a perfectly clean environment. That's just the way my brain works. And some people compare that to the way that Einstein worked. Well, I like to use that excuse. Sorry, I'll move this. I like to use that excuse with my wife.
Yeah.
It's not a cluttered mind, it's just a creative mind. So this room, and then there's a slightly larger bedroom, which is immediately on the other side of this. And I've put, where the wardrobe was, I've built in just dedicated shelving, which is just full of the machines. So there's an Apple II Euro plus the more modern Commodore 64. There's a 64 bread bin, the various disk drives to go with them, an Amiga 500, the Exidy Sorcerer, multitude of micro Bs, including the limited edition one that Ewan bought out, which has the little MIPS processor on the core board, a Sinclair ZX81, HP 86, which is their more the industrial sort of little basic programmable IEEE 488 controller type machine, a Mac Quadra, a digital piano that I can't play, another nice workbench with a couple of monitors so that I can sit them on the bench in there, as well as the 3 3D printers. So that's all tucked into what was supposed to be another spare bedroom. There is a lounge in there, which you could fold out if you really wanted to, but you probably need to rearrange things a little bit. But yeah, all the machines work. And for things like the micro Bs and the other stuff, I built some of those really awesome, let's see if I had a board here, but there's a project by Hoglet67, so if anybody Googled that, which is a Raspberry Pi Zero based RGB to HDMI converter, and does all sorts of different formats. It was bought out for I've got a BBC Micro as well. It was bought out but initially for the people wanting to use BBC Micros and the RGB or RGBI or analog RGB outputs. And it uses the Raspberry Pi Zero in bare metal mode, so not running Linux, but just with firmware running straight on the processors, so it's really nice and quick to encode that and spit out HDMI. And I think Jan Beta on his retro channel just had a video about using a board based on that same thing. And the designs are all free on GitHub. So I've built up some of those so they're a bit easier to interface instead of using the proper CGA monitor. And I've still got a Commodore 1084, which was the Amiga monitor, I think, the nice one. But instead of using it, I can just now plug it into any of the HDMI monitors or things around. So I did that and used Gotex for the floppy disk emulation, or a Gotek clone, and I got a bunch of boards done, JLC, PCB, and built those up, because I think it only ends up costing you about $20 Australian or something for the board and all the components, including the STM32. So built those so that I can use those on the micro Bs. I can use them on there's a Pioneer MSX machine, as well, which was a weird machine that also did video overlays for back in those days when people were doing like their own VHS videos. You could plug the video source in, you could do titling over the top of it. But it's still an MSX games machine as well, or MSX home computer. and they all use the the standard sort of floppy drives. So the Gotecs are great for those, and you can use the Gotek and the Amiga as well. There's an Amiga 500 there, and I've got a also a disk emulator for the Apple. I can't remember what it's called. So I sometimes use them, but I get distracted by shiny things.
Yeah.
So one moment I'll be doing lots of stuff in here and fiddling or trying to reverse engineer something, and I'm doing a project with a friend at the moment where we're trying to reverse engineer some communications protocols on a particular device, which I really enjoy. Again, it's a bit like that camera job, getting down into nuts and bolts. But then the next minute I'll want to go and play with the Commodore 64 and use the Pi 1541, which is the Raspberry Pi emulator for the drive. Or I'll want to go downstairs and do something on the big CNC that I built, which is the Open Builds Ox from
I was going to ask you about that too.
And so I've got that as well, and I really use it. But it was the joy of building it that I was really interested in. And this one's got a cutting area of 1270 by 870 mil, so it's fairly decent size.
It's pretty large.
So that it takes up a full 2 meter long bench in the corner, and I could have probably got away with a smaller one, but whatever.
So you also mentioned that you have, it sounds like you've got all the tools. You also mentioned that you have a laser cutter, and you've mentioned 3D printers.
So I've got the sorry.
I was just going to ask, what sort of things do you do with the CNC machine?
It's kind of funny. My daughter runs this little sideline label come something or other business for the fun of it, called Mouse at Play, and they live in Queensland, where she does labels for bottles and things, which the young mums all seem to enjoy, labeling things and making them look neat and tidy, because they never stay that way. But she also has there were a couple of toy type ideas and things. So initially I just did some random cutout stuff. I wanted to try and do PCBs on it, and I'd had a couple of goes, but you've got to have auto leveling essentially, and there's support for that in the various Gerbil controllers. But again, distracted by other shiny things. So the most recent things I had done was to mill the IKEA style bamboo chopping boards and turn them into puzzle type things for young kids. So cut out these little cloud shapes with numbers on them, and use the I've got a K40 laser, the same as I think Sound used to have a K40. And I really like mine.
Yeah, I've got one as well.
If you spend the time, and it can take you quite a few hours to get all the alignments right, of course, take out the silly platform that's in it. I've got a manually height adjustable little platform in it, so I can cater for the different thicknesses of material. And I use the K40 Scorcher software on it, and it just does a great little job, right up to 6mm acrylics. So I use that for engraving the wood for her, or at least until Christmas, because we bought her one, and then had it sent up to their place and spent, I think, about a day and a bit getting it all as aligned as we could, and it performs really, really well, especially for the very low price. So do that sort of stuff on it. Use it for cutting acrylics. I did I'll just see if I can find a picture of it. I did an Altair 8800, the Arduino-based clone of it. I did that for my son, and I'll just try and find the picture because it came out fabulously. It was blue, clear blue, and normal clear acrylic, and then all the switches on the front and the LEDs and things, so you can achieve some really, really nice things. So if you'll just bear with me for 1 second.
Yeah, of course.
But it's awesome for those sort of projects. I was wondering what date it was, but considering I gave it to him on his birthday, I should probably remember that, shouldn't I?
It's just a question of what year then. Well, while you're looking that up, Dodgy Brothers just asked whether you've tried to cut metal on your CNC machine, and what materials have you used?
I've tried doing, I think it's 6061 aluminium, and had mixed results. Some people have really good results. I think the biggest problem, speaking to a machinist that I work with, is that I haven't been aggressive enough, and I should be using, for the speed of the rotary tool, and I use a Crest 1 kilowatt spindle, which is a German spindle with very low run out. It's designed as a die cutter, but they're really low run out. The speed that those things run at, you've probably got to use a single flute cutting tool, because you can't clear the chips out fast enough, etc. And you need to take aggressive sort of bites out of the material.
Yes, but otherwise it just rubs against the face.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So yeah, I had tried that and used those sort of materials. And I've tried various plastics and things. It had mostly been some of the timber type stuff, so it's totally underutilized. Like, there's no way I can justify having the machine for the amount that I really use it. So, so yeah, I think I'm getting close.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, Dodgy has been building he's got a CNC machine that he's been modifying over the years, and he just commented, yeah, single flute or double is best for 6061. Yeah, I've had that problem as well with I've got a little CNC machine. I think it's what do they call it? A CNC 6040. So it's 60 centimeter by 40, 6030, whichever it is.
Some of those are awesome because they're built like a brick dunny.
It's very rigid. It's really, really strong. But when I've been cutting aluminium with it, I have a lot of problems trying to get the feeds and the feeds right. I tend to not be aggressive enough with the feed rate. Excuse me, my throat is not doing too well today. So so I get that problem where it kind of burns its way through things instead of making chips. And
it kind of smudges its way through, doesn't it?
Yeah, which is not very pleasant at all. And yeah, it's one of those things where you've just got to do it a lot and learn as you go. Learn the hard way. I need to break some more bits on my learning journey.
Sadly, I can't find this thing. There's a picture on my Twitter, and it'll be around, I thought it was last year, but it might have been, no, I'm sure it was last year, and it was probably around end of June or July, but people will find it. But it was like that sort of project where you're cutting out lots of holes for the LEDs and the switches, and you're doing a multi-layer front panel. And I used some of the is it called Treflite, maybe? The proper labeling stuff, but the silvered version, so that when you then laser through it, you get the black behind it.
Right. So it's multi-layered, and it exposes the other color.
That just comes out really, really nicely. So that's why I like having those sort of toys. And for doing front panels, if you get some white acrylic, spray black spray paint on it, let it dry. Especially the matte paint, and then you laser etch that, you end up with really nice, tidy white lettering, which looks very similar to the stuff that electricians will go and get done on an engraving machine and stuff. So lots of good uses for it, in case my wife is listening.
You've got to justify it.
She's the one that bought me my laser as a birthday or Christmas present, I think it was.
Oh, that's a win.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah. I'm scrolling back through your Twitter feed trying to find that picture, but it must be a long way back. So I've got back as far as February so far. So it'd be middle of last year sometime.
Yeah, it would have been beginning of July or end of June, I thought, but yeah. Time flies when you're getting old. And on the printers, I've got one of the original CTC blacks, which was the MakerBot 2 clone, the dual head, where I never managed to get the dual extrusions working. It always used to bang into things. And I got one of the the Aldi/Wang Hao, I think it's the i3, and that's a fabulous little printer.
I've
Got that
heard
on
so many
special.
good things about that.
Mm.
Yeah, I think my friend Andy might have one of those, and someone else from Melbourne Hackerspace as well. It was one of those printers that was cheap enough and good enough. Like it does a surprisingly good job for the surprisingly cheap price that Aldi had it for. It sold out very, very quickly.
I think we got it. We were in Queensland at my daughter's, and I went to the Aldi stores there because I saw the price kept dropping, and got it for something ridiculously cheap at the time, and bought it back as luggage on the flight. It was well worth it. And the resin printer I've got is the original Anycubic Photon, which is great.
Okay.
Like, it's messy and stuff, but they do a really good job. It'd be nice to have the faster exposure time of the newer models, because this one we're still talking about 11 seconds per layer, I think.
Okay.
But if you just let it run, then it's fine. So.
Yep.
And I run an air purifier in the room to try and stop some of the smell, because the first time I ever did it, I stank the whole house out. So that wasn't too good.
Yep. I have found the image. But James said the layered plastic and metal stuff was called dye bond. So for people that are wanting to make their own face plates, look up dye bond. So I'm just going to switch my thing again. Sorry, it's just taking a little while to load. There we go. Okay, so so this is the one that you built?
Yep. So I did the front panel and all the goodies, and you can download I think it used an Arduino Mega, and you can just download the firmware and stuff, but it gives you the full emulation of the machine. And he was extremely happy with the fact that his old man had gone to that effort for him, so that was kind of nice.
Yeah. Oh, and I can see that there is a whole lot of strip board or Vero board or whatever it is in there. So lots of hand wiring on those LEDs.
Yeah, it was a bucket load of work.
It would have been. Yeah, that is exactly the sort of job that I hate doing. Sitting there cutting lots of little jumper wires and trying to make it all fit.
And trying to do it reasonably neatly because you're in a transparent case. So.
Yeah. Oh, and this is so I'm just opening the artwork here. So this was your version of the front panel artwork?
Yeah, so I think I only had to do a little bit of tidying up or changing or something compared to the artwork that was sort of available on the project. And I might have just based that on one of the photos that was out there anyway. So I printed it off on the paper first to check sizes and layouts and see if it was going to look right.
Yep.
It's really cool, that whole, you can completely forget that there's an Arduino behind it because it gives you that look and feel. So I used to ride my push bike out to CSIRO out in the countryside, where a friend of mine who's well known in the old days on, not on IRC, on the Usenet, the news group things, and that's Rod Speed. So if you Google Rod Speed, he's the notorious troll, but he's a magnificent guy, and he used to run the computer facilities out there. And at age 14, I'd ride my push bike out, and he'd let me sit in front of a terminal on a PDP-9. And of course, to get the old 9 running, they'd toggle in the bootloader and then hit the tape drive, and I think it had a 5 megabyte hard disk in it. So I was very lucky to have access to some of those sort of things as a kid. So. And just takes you back to those sort of days, the original days of real computing, where not every piece of code is 50 megabytes or 500 megabytes just to do a hello world. Yeah.
So using the Arduino based like LT Arduino, it really has that feeling of using the original machine from your point of view.
Yeah, because the speed same, and if you stick an AM radio next to it, you can even play the well-known Daisy tune that they played on the real Altair. It comes out the same on an AM radio from the emissions from the EMI from it. So it really does make you feel just like you're using it.
Wow. Um, I'm not sure what this is referring to, but James said, "Does the missus know you're using her Thermomix strainer?" What is that in relation to? Was that in one of the images? Or, I don't know what James is talking about there.
She does have a Thermomix, and I stay well away from it. I think
Okay.
I've made a risotto in it once, but I wouldn't dare. Anybody who's ever been married to a Finnish woman knows that you don't mess with them.
Yeah. Now, sorry, I'm just rearranging windows here. I've been clicking through and opening things as you've been talking about them. So, so I've got so many windows open, all the way back to the RF simulation software, and I've kind of lost where I am.
There's another little project that I did, which was kind of fun, and it was I did a little Raspberry Pi Zero hat, which sorry, focus is terrible.
Yeah, I'm going to.
But it has.
I'm going to see if I can make you single. Yeah, there we go.
It's a little hard to see. But somebody yelled out and went, "Oh, I'd really like some battery management stuff." So it's got a LiPo charger, cell protection, real-time clock, GPS, 4-port USB hub, USB to serial, a single channel of switching of up to 500 milliamps, I think it was, with the FET. All integrated onto one little board, and a push button as well, so you can use it for the switch off, to sit on top of a Pi Zero hat to do whatever you want with. So this was the big expanded version, so you could run it off an 18650, and whether you want to use it as a webcam or to keep track of where something was going or whatever else. But that was another little home project.
Yeah.
Which was good.
So that's one of those.
I really enjoyed just throwing things together and solving little problems for people. And
so that particular board, is that one that is like something that you want to have in your toolkit, because you often want power management and those sorts of things with Pi Zero projects? There are lots of little building blocks like that once you build them, you end up using them in all sorts of different things.
And then my son had an interest in doing some LoRa stuff. He goes to DEF CON each year and sets up comms over there, so he's one of the goons. But we found some, I don't have the populated one in front of me, sorry, but there are some 1 watt LoRa modules, the E22 series, I think they're called. He's got an amateur radio license as well. And he wanted a hat for a normal Pi. So again, it's got real-time clock, it's got provision for GPS. This one, I don't think I put power management on, but I did a proper bandpass filter for the output of the LoRa module. That actually, I'll throw that on the microscope, because there's something you might be interested in. That shot in the background.
Yes.
I'll fire up the mobile phone camera if that's all right.
Of course, go for it.
See if I don't know if you've got any better suggestions, but I use some Droid Cam on this, and that seems to work nicely for me. That
is what I've been using as well. It's feeding that into OBS works surprisingly well.
Just trying to find OBS. There we are. And the phone.
So, hang on, I will make you full screen again so we can see where that's going.
So that image, so that's my digital microscope. That's a Raspberry Pi Zero.
Okay.
With the high-res Raspberry Pi camera.
Yes.
Sorry, I apologize, it's upside down. And then the macro adapter that they sell, and it does a. This has got zoom. I didn't know Droid Cam had zoom. Let's put it the right way up. That might be better. And it makes an absolutely magnificent digital microscope for well, I guess about $100 by the time you buy the camera and the adapter for it.
Yeah, that looks great.
Yeah, so that's looking at a little Zigbee board that I did ages ago. And that monitor, it actually pulls, it can push back reasonably flat against the wall, or else I can pull it out again as well. But anyway, if I put this under it, something that people sometimes forget about when they're doing RF projects. Let me just focus that. Is that
I see a lot of stitching there.
Yeah, that's right. So that was a 400 to 500 meg bandpass filter that I put on the board. So if you did really want to use it, especially with 1 watt, and as I said, you've got an amateur radio license, so we can operate sort of higher power on these things, especially on the 400 and something megs, to make sure that we didn't have any nasty, spurious or similar stuff coming out of it. And people tend to forget that the average little RF12 module or other things that you, hang on, let me change this back, sorry. Those little RF12 modules or the LoRa modules or the you name it modules, if you're running bigger antennas on them and effectively radiating more power, they're quite often nasty harmonics and there are out of band radiations and other things, so you need to be a bit careful. So that's why I put a bandpass filter on it as well, and that was designed using some of the free tools that are around these days, which you didn't have in the old days. That might have been ELSIE, I think it was, ELSIE, and it's a Windows design tool which allows you to model the low pass filter and display all the characteristics, and it builds basically as designed, which is really nice, even on FR4. Yeah, so there, that was a squirrel.
Yeah. Well, there was another squirrel that you've just given us as well, which is that microscope setup. A couple of people have been asking questions about that. So the first question I had was, how do you have that mounted? It looks like it's on some kind of boom arm. Is that a modified lamp base or something?
Yeah, it is. It's like the smaller version of the big lamp. But it's like that so that I can move the thing up or down or whatever. The illuminator came with another one of the USB output microscope cameras that I got on eBay or Banggood or something. But you could just do your own LED ring. But it's nice because even for, let me just focus on that. So even when the components are really quite large on the screen, I really should change back this other scene, sorry.
Okay.
We did kind of think that this would just go all over the place, didn't we?
We did.
Oops, that's black. Let's try that again.
Okay.
So there's still enough room to get under there with the soldering iron and work with the iron. But you're getting really good magnification. Those are, I think, 0603 maybe components. And so the distance thing all works out really well, and being able to just move it up and down or move it out of the way altogether, I found much nicer than using the fixed platform that I had before.
And so you wanted to know what software you're running on the Pi in order to get, is it PiCam to HDMI?
Just the standard Raspberry Vid, or I think I'm running the Raspberry Vid, so I could actually be streaming that and importing it into OBS, but I didn't have time this morning because I was trying to clear some space on my normal desk. But it just does it. Like that's the nice thing. The Raspberry Pi just does it, and you get full screen video. You can title it if you want to. I wanted to do, and I can SSH into it, especially if I could remember the password, which I changed like a good InfoSec person.
Yes.
And then you could grab stills and other things, and it's it's really nice resolution and looks really good. So nothing special required, just the standard Raspberry video software, and connected to the high res Raspberry Pi camera and with the macro lens on it.
Yeah.
which I think I got from Core Electronics. So.
Okay. Yep. Have you noticed any latency as you move a board? Is there any latency on the screen? It's pretty much immediate.
Yeah, it is immediate. Like totally. There's no noticeable delay at all, which makes it really nice for working under. Because I have these wonderful really eyeballs that give me very good peripheral vision. It means that I can't use a normal stereoscopic microscope easily without forcing myself to go cross-eyed or straight-eyed. And so I really like using a digital microscope. And you might think that it's in the way, but I tend to sit on the stool there. I tend to sit just above it anyway. So I'm looking over the screen, and then the microscope is sort of there. So, and I'm very comfortable just looking at the screen. I don't have no issues with matching where my fingers go compared to the screen.
So. Yeah. So it's sitting kind of like in a microphone position. So you can look over it or you can look below it, and it doesn't really get in your way.
Yeah.
Great.
So that was great. So it's cleaner and better quality than the couple of $100 Banggood or eBay or whatever one that I'd had before that, which I could still be using, but it was much heavier because the body of the camera, it's about that big, and it's almost like a solid cube of aluminium. They made them really well, but this thing's just so light that being able to put it on there on I think that's a cheap IKEA lamp, so it was only $16 or something anyway. I just took the head off it. And normally when I'm not trying to film, I actually have an LED panel sitting up there, which is just low enough so that I can still open the flip top cupboards up there. But this will probably...
But it gives you good overhead illumination.
Yeah, so this will probably upset everybody's Google device.
Everybody hit mute.
On the bench light.
All right, turning on the bench light.
And then, like, it's just really, really. I don't need that small light at all when I do that. And I've just got really nice illumination across the whole thing. And again, they were nice and cheap. I just hung it from chains on the ceiling. And I think they're about $50 each or something. So, in one off, it was great. And it's not a cold white, and it's not a warm. It's I think about a 3600K or something. Let me turn this off again, but I'll do it manually.
Yeah, I really like using large LED panels because they distribute the light very evenly.
Yeah.
Dodgy said in the comments, posted a link to camera info in Discord. Now, I'm not sure if that means Dodgy has posted it or whether he asked for it to be posted. So, hang on, I'm just going to have a quick look in Discord and see if it's in there.
So it's the one you can buy from Little Bird or from Core Electronics, the normal macro lens and the high-res camera.
Yeah, great. Yes, Dodgy did posted it. Posted it. I can't speak today. Yeah, thanks, Dodgy. That's a really interesting setup. I've been thinking about what to do about my overhead camera as well. And I thought a couple of times about maybe using a Raspberry Pi with the high quality camera and just mounting it over my workbench as the general downward camera. And so you've got yours with the macro adapter or with the macro lens, rather.
Yeah, with the macro, it's integrated in it is the lens as well. Yeah. That would probably work well with some of their other lenses. I've got the other ones in the drawer as well because I bought the one or two other standard lenses that were available for the high-res camera.
Yeah.
It's certainly better quality than, this is a 922, the Logitech. I'm really pretty disappointed with the overall performance of it. I've tried to use it above the bench for the rare occasions that, if I happen to feel like doing a YouTube video, which I hadn't. But I think that I'd be inclined to use more of those cameras.
Yeah, it looks like a really good option. Okay, so one thing I'm interested in, we talked about it earlier, but which is the power analysis side of things. And yeah, so what I've got, let me see if I can grab it without ripping my headset out of my ears. Okay, I got one of these little current ranger devices, and this is about as high tech as I've got in terms of measuring very low amounts of power. I don't do a lot of low power work, but I wanted to be able to measure things like power consumption of ESP32s and H.266s and those sorts of things.
Yep.
And this just gives you, I think it might give information out of the USB port. I can't even remember, but it displays on the screen. But it's only measuring. It doesn't actually do any power delivery. You have to connect it in line with a power supply or something like that. So the device that you've got that you've been using for testing on that tracking project, yeah, so is that an integrated power supply as well?
Yeah, so it's made by Koitech in Sweden, I think they are, QOITCH.com. They were a startup, I think in combination with Sony originally or something interesting like that, but now it's a standalone company. And Vanya Samuelson, I hope I got that right, especially if she watches this. She's the CEO, so the relatively small technical team. But they brought these out. They're less than $1,000 Australian, which makes them really cheap in anybody else's sensible money. The power supply will do up to about 4.55 volts, so it won't do right up to 5 volts, but it's designed for IoT things, so really you're not talking about 5 volts anyway.
Yeah.
It has a very accurate power supply in it, very accurate current measurement. I think it's down to, I'd have to look at the spec. It's in the nano amps, and of course, all calibrated and that sort of stuff. So you can set up current limiting, or you can set cutoff. You can then graph the power supply voltage, the current. It has additional A to D inputs. So sometimes I actually run it with a board that has a 0.1 or 0.2 ohm resistor on it. So if I do want to measure the current draw of something else that I can't supply from this thing, like an existing circuit, so you can measure the voltage across that resistor. And then the other A to D input you can use to then measure the voltage itself, or run it through a divider. It has serial I/O on it as well, like a normal TTL level UART, between 1.8 and 5 volt logic. And the awesome thing is that in the software itself, if you've got an IoT device and you're looking at serial with it as well, so it's basically an FTDI bridge style thing. All the logs and everything are time-stamped together. So you can see in your device when, let's say you had a Raspberry Pi Zero, if you're seeing a message come up saying wireless is now being turned on in the startup log, you can point to that exact location and look at the exact current consumption at that point in time. And because all those tools are tied together, it makes it really nice. So I got a few of these for work, and then I went, yeah, I'm going to get one of those myself.
It was something that was so useful that you just needed to have one handy.
Yeah. Again, don't use it all that often, but it's awesome having it. So, and for the accuracy and the things you can do, and you can also, so that's stuff is all available as it is. And then if you pay a subscription, which you can pay a month at a time if you want, like if you've got a project coming up, you can just buy a month of additional stuff that will give you full Python scripting, battery emulation, battery profiling. So if you're going to use, let's say a 2032 cell in a project, and you've got a rough idea of what your current consumption is going to be, you can then set up a script to simulate that and graph the performance of the battery, and then use this to simulate the battery on the product as well, instead of wearing that battery each time. So super useful for all sorts of stuff related to low power and IoT style devices. And I think they're going great guns with them. And just interfaces over normal USB, as well as having a power supply to cope with the, I think you can do 3 amps or so or more, something like that.
Oh, that's significant. That seems like total overkill for the sort of projects you'd use this in.
Yeah.
But yeah, if it did up to an amp, I'd be very, very happy. It's, at least that way you cover things like the startup surge on an ESP32 comfortably.
Yeah, and the sampling rate, I think is about 4 kilohertz. So it could be faster if you were interested in like really, really short pulses during your startup phase.
Yes.
But hopefully your caps are taking care of that anyway. And 4 kilohertz is pretty darn good still to be able to see
That is pretty good.
all the cycles.
Yeah.
So I think I ran a couple of boards through, and again there might be a couple of things on Twitter showing some power usage and stuff. So.
Well, I am definitely going to look into those. I'm not sure at the moment. Right now, I don't have any projects where it's that critical. I found that this little device has been really, really useful, measuring very small power consumption. Obviously, not nearly as sophisticated as that, but I'm going to put that Koitec device on my wouldn't this be nice wish list. I've just dropped a URL for it in the chat as well. So if anybody's wanting, okay. So Sion has just dropped in a link for another device, which is the Power Profiler Kit 2. And he said, this is what you want if you don't want to pay that much. It's fantastic, but only goes down to 10 microamps. Okay, so it won't go down into the nanoamp sort of region that the Koitec device will do.
And there was something else about it, because I looked at those and I thought they were really interesting, because I was going to just add one to the drawers for the fun of it. And it was either something to do with its power supply ability or the current or something it could provide. Anyway,
there was some limitation.
But it certainly looks like a good alternative. And there are others, I think, these days as well. This has been out for a couple of years now. But there are always new options, and I think there are a couple of DIY style things as well with very good resolution. It was nice just to buy the box that just worked. So
yeah, cool. Well, we don't have a whole lot of time left, so I just want to put the shout out before we get too close that if anybody has questions for Iggy, please drop them in the chat and I'll pass them on while we still have time to answer them. I should have said that ages ago, giving people some warning.
I can't believe how long we've been talking.
I know. 2 hours goes by like that. So Sion said for the Power Profiler kit, it goes down to 200 nanoamps, so 0.2 microamps.
Yeah.
So yeah, still not as low as the Koitec system, but it's $150 versus close to $1,000. So yeah, it's a question of how much do you spend for what performance you need. And,
well, it's like soldering irons, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
I mean, I'm lucky I've got a pace station up the top there, along with tweezers, which I absolutely love. And then I've got a dodgy Heiko clone that Jaycar did at one stage, which is nice because you can still buy the Heiko tips. But
yes.
I'd really like to add a JVC to it. But as we know,
yeah, those JVC ones, are they the ones that do what is it, like an ultrasonic heating, or they use some strange heating technology?
But they do have the heater in the element itself, and they're ultra fast. And even with a super fine tip on it, you've still got the because they're 100 and something watt iron, but that into a fraction of a millimeter tip still allows you to do really fine rework without having to worry too much about having to preheat the board or ending up using a large tip. And we use them exclusively at work. So I think Sion's loving his. I'm pretty sure he got a JVC, didn't he?
Okay.
I think.
Sion just commented, my new JVC is amazing. Yeah, so I think he likes it. Oh, I think he likes it. Joe Anon just asked whether you've tried a TS100 or a TS80, which are the little USB soldering irons.
Haven't tried one.
No, I've got one hanging up just up there.
They probably get similar sort of performance, I guess, but I haven't tried one. It'd be interesting to see one.
Yeah, I've got a TS100, and I've got it specifically. I actually bought it because I wanted to use it on the pick and place machine, because when I'm working on that, I'm often having to solder connections and things directly on the machine, and I can't move the machine, and my soldering irons are generally bench irons attached to the bench, so I had to yeah. I thought I would get a USB powered iron, or not USB. It's got a DC barrel jack in it, just as a backup thing for something that I could use wherever I needed to be. And I was amazed at how good it is. It's one of those things where I thought I will get it just as an emergency use only thing. And once I tried it, I realized how good it was. So yeah, I'm very happy with it. It definitely doesn't have the power necessary or the thermal mass necessary to do larger joints, but for fine work, light connections, they're great.
I'm essentially on a recent assembly thing I did for someone. I was swapping between plugging the tweezers in and plugging the normal iron in on the pace, because the pace is the same thing. The cartridge has the heater in it. So I would want to add a JBC just so that I could leave the tweezers in those permanently, because SMD rework with tweezers doesn't. That's it, easy.
Yeah, it's magic. Just grab it and pick it off the board. Cool. Now, there is one other thing I want to ask about while we still have time. You sent in the email you sent me about different things you've worked on. You talked about chartering local aero club planes to fly to Wagga to do work on their SCO Unix systems. So does that mean that you fly? Are you a pilot yourself, or were you?
I have a logbook.
No. You have a logbook?
I have a logbook that had a number of hours in it, right up to going pre-solo before I ran out of pocket money when the kids were very young. And after that, I just flew with friends a lot. And I had a 1-year-old friend. His son is senior A380 captain for Qantas, who these days spends all his time flying his drones because there's no flying work with Qantas.
Yes.
Yeah, but he used to, he had an instrument rating, and so we'd go out to the Aero Club. He'd go and do half an hour of instrument practice, and he'd just go, right, it's your aircraft, and I'd fly around for half an hour, or 3/4 an hour, and he'd pick up the bill, which was awesome.
That's even better.
And we used to do that all the time. So I have a reasonable number of hours that aren't in the logbook, but I'd never got around to finishing my license. But this company of solicitors, a reasonably large group of solicitors in Wagga, I did stuff for them before when I was working for that IBM Apple dealership, and then when I went out on my own, they wanted me to keep doing it. And if they had an office full of people trying to use WordPerfect and everything stopped, then they just went, just go grab the guys from the Aero Club. So the CFI from the Aero Club would just jump in the 172 with me. We'd fly to Wagga instead of driving the 2 and a bit hours. Go and fix whatever was necessary on the SCO Unix systems that they had, and come back. If I was doing a longer job, often I'd do upgrades over a weekend. I'd drive over on a Friday, start at 5 in the afternoon, and finish at o'clock on a Monday morning.
It all had to be done out of work hours.
That's right. And I always got it done, which is why they kept coming back, and they didn't care. It was just, I would just go to the local nice hotel just down the road, and they knew that I could just book in whenever and didn't need extra permission. So it was kind of a good lurk for a one-man business at the time. So
interesting work, and you got to fly to work occasionally. Cool. Well, just before we wrap up, I was just wondering if there are any personal projects that you wanted to talk about, because we're already at 12 o'clock, but if there are any in particular that you would like to wave in front of the camera.
No, I'm just sort of playing with all sorts of random things, and some of them I've shown. Even though I've bagged them as being a bit of a marketing ploy, the RP2040s from Raspberry Pi.
Yes.
I did actually, when they were still available, buy about 5 or 10 of them or something and drop them in the drawer. And I used one just the other day with an accelerometer. because it is such a cheap platform, the only problem is that you can't really buy them. And I still think that they essentially bought them out just as a teaser, so you would buy people's other boards with extra features added, which is the only way that suppliers could survive. Like if you were trying to sell these things, you'd have to sell 1 million of them to make you 50 cents each, or you'd sell your own board and hopefully make $5 on it or something. So, so I've done a little bit with those, but not much. And yeah, it's just one shiny thing after another, really.
Cool. Well, you are quite active on Twitter, and you're often posting about things that that you're working on. So I'm just going to drop your I've just dropped the link to your Twitter account into the chat so people can check that out.
As a friend of mine says, some of those tweets are angry old man yells at cloud.
That's still fun. Now, one last question. Aaron asked, what is your go-to MCU for projects?
Still the ABRs of some sort, because I've been using them since 2001 or something. I think I said to you that I wrote a full PAL timing compliant video generator serial terminal for the 8535 back in 2001, and I still find references to it on Russian websites, which is really weird. So
what are
I
you
like
doing
them
hanging
because I'm
around on
familiar
Russian
with the platform.
websites?
I don't often go to Russian websites for the purpose of listening to us. But I like it because I'm used to the architecture and I'm very comfortable. Again, once I restart, it takes me like half an hour to get my brain back in sync in writing assembler and stuff for them, and I enjoy writing assembler. C is good as well, but it's just I like being at the machine level and having that control, and I think it's more the personal sense of achievement or something that I get out of doing it. Lots of times I'll just use the Arduino IDE. Some people go, oh, I never touch the Arduino IDE. It's like, okay, well, if you enjoy rewriting thousands of libraries for every project you do, good for you.
Yes.
But yeah, so the Arduino-ish IDE or Platform IO on little things, typically with a Mega 32 or a Mega 32 U4 or something. But now I'm doing a bit more stuff with SAM things. I want to learn more about the SAM 34R with the integrated LoRa. Also going to be playing with some Decawave radios, ultra wideband. So they sit at between 6 and 8 gigs, and they sit in the noise floor, so you can't see them.
Interesting.
And each channel is about a gig wide. So I'm going to use those on a particular project, which would benefit from people not being able to see if a door sensor or something operates. So if you can't see it, you can't jam it, and if it's that wide, you can't jam it. So I bought some of those Decawave modules. They also have positioning, so that the modules can tell you where they are in relation to other modules in distance, with a resolution of supposedly about 10 centimeters. So you'll see some YouTube videos of people running around around tennis courts and running along the lines, and on the diagram it actually shows them running along the lines, because a couple of sensors that they've got there, it allows you to triangulate and plot the positions of those. So they could be good as well. So
that sounds really cool. So with just a couple of fixed known positions as reference points, you can do some very interesting things.
And for $20 each per module, ready to go, to connect to a micro with a SPI or something, they're great. So I got those from Mauser, the DWM 3000s.
Yeah. Okay. The fact that you just said that is very relevant to a question that Sion asked. He says, I have a serious question for Iggy. He's been spinning off names and part codes for stuff he worked on even decades ago. How the heck does he remember it all? So,
well, I can't tell you what I did yesterday. But it's just there. I don't know. It's like people remembering all the 74LS series, I guess, and other weird bits and pieces. It's just stuff that sticks. I leave the day-to-day management of what bills have to be paid to she who must be obeyed, who's a trained accountant. And she keeps me in line in that regard. And it gives my brain room to store the stuff I'm interested in.
Yep.
And sometimes it needs a
cool.
bit of a kickstart because you forget things, of course. But
Yeah.
I say I don't have an EE, so I'd say in the B-sides talk that I'm a technologist because I'm not allowed to call myself an engineer, especially in Victoria.
Yes.
And but the whole engineering principle, I think, is you don't have to know everything. You just need to know how to find out, and you need to know what your limits are and acknowledge those. And I've applied that in IT. I've applied it in electronics, and thankfully, I've never got into serious issues. So I think that's probably an important takeaway for some of the youngsters. We get quite a few grads through where I work. Some of them come in as a grad as the golden anointed ones and think that they know everything, and then they find out that all they know is how to learn more.
Yes. And how to find the answer. You don't need to know the answer, you just need to know how to find it.
That's right.
Absolutely. Now, your comment about the Decawave thing has got me interested. I just found the Decawave DWM 1000 tennis court test video, which is 4 minutes, 20 seconds long. Is that the one that you're talking about? Okay, cool. I'm going
So you hear
to...
varying things about the range that they'll get and whatever, but I bought some modules to experiment with, and I don't want long range, but they could be really cool. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to drop this. I haven't actually watched this video yet, and I'm not going to click the link myself because it'll start auto-playing. But I've just dropped the link to that video into the chat as well. So for anyone that's interested in the Decawave modules, that's something that's really interesting to me. So maybe we should follow up and have a chat about that sort of thing in a future live stream. So that's something that you haven't done yet. You're just looking into that. Is that right?
Yeah, just bought the modules.
Yeah. Okay. And of course, it depends on what you can and can't talk about in relation to that project. It sounds like you do a lot of work helping out friends on commercial projects, in which case you don't necessarily want to
for free.
Yeah. But it puts you in the position where you don't necessarily want to disclose a whole lot of things because it's someone else that you're helping, and you don't want to jeopardize that.
Although with this, like the Decawave things, I've bought them myself, and I'm going to just use it with some sensors and Arduino-ish thingies and just have a play. So there should be no issues because there's no need to discuss what my long-term new job plan is.
Yeah. Yeah, and you've mentioned LoRa as well. That is another thing that I would very much like to talk about sometime in the future. I've got a whole bunch of LoRa hardware here, and for a commercial project that I'm not going to mention, I'm in a similar situation sometimes. I'm about to have to do a whole lot of LoRa-related stuff. So talking about your experiences with that would be interesting too.
I haven't played with the LoRa WAN part of it. I've just done LoRa to LoRa.
Okay, yep.
But yeah, they seem quite amazing as well. Lots of potential.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Iggy.
You're welcome.
You've done some very interesting things over the course of your career. It sounds like you're about to get into some more interesting things as well, but we can't really talk about that. So thanks everybody for coming along to the live stream. I'm going to end the live stream and hit mute, and then I'm going to have a quick private chat to Iggy. So I hope you all have a fantastic weekend, what's left of it, and we'll see you all next week. So
see everyone.
Thanks. Bye everybody. Oh, hang on. That